That concludes the news portion of our show. Please stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here yet again in our rooftop studio in Jerusalem on a beautiful day. My guest today is Santis. He's the director of the NGO monitors BDS in the Pews. Itzhak, thank you for being on the show.
Good to be here.
Tell our viewers a little bit about what is NGO Monitor.
Well, NGO Monitor is an organization that was founded about 10 years ago by Professor Gerald Steinberg at Bar-Ilan University. It was immediately after the Durban anti-racism conference, which took place in Durban, South Africa in 2001. And there was an NGO forum. NGO is a non-governmental organization, and there were about 1,500 NGOs that participated in this forum. And they had a final declaration that called for the total and complete isolation of the State of Israel, referring to Israel as an apartheid state, as a racist state, and a state which needs to be isolated and essentially dismantled. And from that grew the BDS movement, which is the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement. And this whole process, which involves hundreds of NGOs, in an international campaign to isolate and delegitimize the State of Israel, we call this the Durban strategy. And we monitor organizations that are involved in this Durban strategy. And our goal is to discover the networks, discover where the money's coming from, and to end the money flow going to these organizations which are trying to unravel and dismantle the State of Israel.
Well, you're in charge of something called BDS in the Pews. What is that initiative about?
Well, as the name implies, BDS in the Pews, this has to do with how BDS is manifesting itself in the various churches, both liberal as well as evangelical churches. And so the way this works, there are many church aid agencies in Europe which receive funding from European governments, and then in turn they take the funds and they disperse it to different NGOs, which are part of the NGO network that are attacking Israel.
This anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist movement, BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction, is it having any success in the Christian churches? Because, you know, Israel's the only country in the Middle East that has freedom of religion. Most of these churches can not even go into other countries with a Bible in their hands. Why would they stand against Israel?
That's a very complex answer. First of all, where the most success is taking place is in the liberal mainline Protestant churches in the United States, particularly in the Presbyterian Church USA, and the United Methodist Church, as well as a few other liberal churches like the Quakers and the Mennonites and so on. We're seeing efforts in other churches as well, but there's a lot of resistance within those churches to these efforts. But where we're beginning to see some serious inroads are starting to take place are in evangelical churches in the United States as well. And that is a result of an initiative that's taken place in Bethlehem just recently, something called Christ at the Checkpoint, where they're trying to insert the Palestinian nationalist narrative into an evangelical framework and to make it palatable to evangelical Christians.
The people I talk about in the evangelical world, this Christ at the Checkpoint, they find it just offensive. You know, the idea that Jesus was a Palestinian martyr and a fighter for the Palestinian cause is something that goes so far against their theology that it comes off just straight out offensive. Do you really believe that this is having inroads in the evangelical community?
My understanding from talking to some evangelicals who are in the know is that this is taking place and taking root, especially among young evangelicals, kind of the left wing of the evangelical movement, which is beginning to emerge. It's a generational thing, as far as I understand it, and you know they're looking for social justice issues to latch onto in the United States as well as around the world, and that makes them susceptible to the Palestinian nationalist narrative, which uses the language of human rights and the language of peace and justice in order to win over supporters. And so there's been some inroads in that respect, especially among the younger generation. When you have people who come to Christ at the Checkpoint from various evangelical colleges, whether it's Gary Burge from Wheaton College, considered to be the Harvard of the evangelical world in the United States, as the Reverend Stephen Sizer, who's from the Anglican Church in the United Kingdom, not evangelical, but he does meet with the evangelicals and work with the evangelicals toward this end. So yeah, there are inroads being made, and our hope and our goal is to try to blunt those inroads as much as possible.
You know, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
My message is simple. Be aware of what's happening regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in the sense of who's trying to convince you of what, and that there's a definite effort to undermine support for Israel in the evangelical world.
Thank you, Yitz, for being on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.